The meeting is now in session. Welcome to the 27th meeting of the Standing Committee on Transport. Following Standing Order 108 and the motion adopted by the committee is meeting on the subject of airport delays and cancellations. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format in line with the motion adopted by the House in June. And for members who are here in the meeting room who want to take the floor, please raise your hand. And if you're on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. The clerk and myself will do our best to observe the speaking order, and we would like your attention on the subject as well.
We have the Honorable Omar Alghabra, Minister of Transport, for the first half of our meeting. For the second half of our meeting, we have from the Department of Transport, Mr. Michael Keenan, Deputy Minister, Aaron McCrory, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Safety and Security, Colin Stacey, Director General for Air Policy, Nicholas Robinson, Director General for Civil Aviation. From the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, we have Mike Saunders, President and Chief Executive Officer, Nancy Fitchett, Vice President, Corporate Affairs and Chief Financial Officer, and Neil Perry, Vice President, Operations. From the Canada Border Services Agency, we have Denis Vinette, Vice President, Travelers Branch. And from Public Health Agency of Canada, we have Jennifer Lutfala, who is the Vice President, Health, Security and Regional Operations Branch. We will now begin with the opening remarks from Minister Alghabra for 5 minutes. Minister, thank you for joining us today. I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I'm grateful that I was invited to come back to speak with you today on this important issue. Merci de me revoir en vite.
Thank you for the invitation.
Virtually today from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And I'm pleased to be with representatives from Transport Canada, who you're familiar with, Michael Keenan, Deputy Minister of Transport, Colin Stacey, Director General Air Policy, Aaron McCrory, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Safety and Security, and Nicholas Robinson, Director General, Civil Aviation. I want to start by saying that the delays we've been seeing at airports are frustratingly unacceptable. Le délai au aéroport.
The delays at airports are unacceptable.
To see travelers sleeping on airport floors because a flight was delayed or canceled. Today, I want to give you an update on the progress made, but also acknowledge that there is still work to be done and share what we are doing to address this. To begin, after a difficult 2 years for the aviation sector, where they almost lost 90% of their business and faced significant layoffs, we saw a massive surge in demand for air travel. 252%. This is the increase in daily passenger volumes between January and August 2022 in Canada. In comparison, in the US, the volume per day increased by 64%. But I want to be clear, that's not an excuse, it's a fact. The aviation sector is a highly integrated sector. Transport Canada has control over certain aspects of it, but it does not manage the operations of most of its components. Having said that, from day one, we decided to focus on action rather than blame. Canadians rightly expect their government to do everything it can to address congestion causes and work with partners to implement solutions. We took actions from the beginning, and we will continue to do so. On a pris des actions.
We took action from the start, and we will continue.
For example, we've hired more than 1,700 CATSA officers since May. The result is that 87% of passengers departing from the 4 largest airports were screened by CATSA within 15 minutes over the second week of August, and that is up from 63% over the first week of May. There's still more work to be done, and we continue to hire CATSA officers every day. Over the past few months, We've also addressed several potential operational bottlenecks, including public health measures, like mandatory random testing, which is now being done outside of airports. As we know, airport operations are extremely interconnected, and coordination between partners is essential. Les opérations dans les Europes.
The operations at the airports are interconnected.
Transport Canada sets airport and airline safety standards. Airlines are responsible for transporting their customers, deal with flight plans, and are responsible for passenger baggage. Airports manage flow of planes and passengers on their premises. CATSA is responsible for security screening, while CBSA is responsible for welcoming and processing international arrivals. Each of our partners has an important role to play in Canada's air sector, and if there are issues in one area, it affects other areas. Over the last few months, I personally met with airlines and airports across the country, as well as other partners in the industry. I've traveled and visited 13 airports, big and small, to see the situation firsthand. I'm happy to see encouraging results, such as only 2% of flights planned for Canada's top 4 airports over the second week of August were cancelled, which is, by the way, closer to the traditional average. This has been a drop from 5% over the first week of July. I also want to touch base on another important subject. Passengers have rights. Les passagers ont des droits.
Passengers have rights.
Was the first government in Canadian history to recognize that and do something about it in 2017. And our government worked with the Canadian Transportation Agency, or the CTA, which is the independent quasi-judicial tribunal and regulator of Canada's national transportation system, to create the Air Passenger Protection Regulations a few years ago. Airlines must respect travelers' rights and compensate travelers who are eligible. The CTA, like any other tribunal, is responsible for receiving and analyzing complaints from travelers who believe they are entitled to compensation in instances where airlines have not provided it. Our government has given the CTA an additional $11 million just recently to help them process the backlog. On a donné 11 millions de dollars.
We provided an additional $11 million to the CTA.
Make sure the CTA has the resources they need to fulfill their mandate under the Air Passenger Protection Regulations. In closing, I want Canadians to know that their government has been actively working at addressing airport congestion caused by surge in air travel demand. We are seeing encouraging results, but there's still more work to be done. There are those who have a vested interest in embellishing reality and undermining confidence in our airline sector only to score political points. Our government, on the other hand, is focusing on tackling the real issues, working with partners, and taking real action. Our plan is to do everything possible to reduce delays. That's what we did, and that's what we will continue to do. Notre plan est de continuer.
Our plan is to continue doing everything that is possible to solve the problem.
That we all need to work together to resolve the situation, and I invite members of this committee to also present solutions. Mr. Chair, that concludes my opening remark, and I'm looking forward to answering questions of my colleague. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. To begin the rounds of questioning today, we will go with Melissa Lantsman. Ms. Lantsman, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, glad to see your symptoms are mild. I do appreciate the minister making time, but it is disappointing that he couldn't find the 2 hours in the summer to appear in front of the Transport Committee, in which his own party was part of a unanimous agreement for a 2-hour appearance today. But more and more Canadians have seen themselves that the problems experienced here in Canada are different, and they're substantially worse than anywhere else in the world. We know that Pearson and Montreal have been ranked number 1 and number 2 of worst airports in the world. That is an international embarrassment. And amongst these delays, the flight disruption, there's a lot of finger pointing. Airlines, airports, passengers themselves, as the minister alluded to in May. And we know a lack of capacity in security agents, customs agents, navigation services, and pandemic restrictions have all contributed to this chaos. Does the minister believe that the government bears any responsibility in any way of what has transpired this summer? Yes or no?
Sorry, Minister, I believe you are on mute. If you could unmute, please.
That is a fair point. I blame it on COVID. Mr. Chair, in speaking of COVID, Canadians know that over the last 2 years, they've witnessed significant disruptions to our economy. They're seeing, and as we are restarting our economy, they're seeing an imbalance in our economy. They're witnessing supply chain disruptions. They're witnessing private sector inability to provide services and products that customers are looking for. They're witnessing similar delays and phenomena across the world. So I know this is a time of uncertainty. I know, rightly so, Canadians expect their government to focus on mitigating these factors and doing everything they can to resolve it. I wanted Canadians to see that from the beginning, their government is focused on taking action to do everything we can to help Canadians. And I hope that months from now, Canadians will look back and see that their government was taking real action, doing everything we can to address the root causes of the issues. We are witnessing
Minister, I'm just going to jump in here.
I am committed to doing everything we can to address these issues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. I have a limited amount of time, and I hear that the answer is no. Mr. Chair, this week alone, families returning from long-awaited vacations on a number of flights into the minister's home airport, Toronto, which is also mine, waited almost 4 hours for their bags. So Mr. Chair, I asked, does the minister think that this is acceptable? How long should they have to wait? Is it 20 minutes? Is it 2 hours? Is it 3 hours? There is no standard. That's the point. Would he agree that the federal government should enact a service standard for those elements of air travel under its jurisdiction so that we can meaningfully improve travel that he doesn't think the government has any responsibility in, according to his last answer?
Mr. Chair, let me just say that for decades, previous governments didn't do anything about passenger rights. It was our government that was the first government in Canadian history that put together regulations that protect passengers' rights. I think this moment in history has exacerbated and exposed other areas that we can certainly work on together to improve. And I want to thank Ms. Landsman because this is a constructive feedback. There will be a time when we're going to look back and look at what else can we do to strengthen our system and to make sure that it's better. Baggage handling is the responsibility of the airlines. Having said that, can we do something to ensure that we have a higher standard? I think that's a good point to raise, a good question to ask. And I look forward to working with members of the committee to improving our aviation sector.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Canadians at home are rightfully frustrated. I'm going to move on to something else since we're not getting any kind of answer. The mandatory use of the ArriveCAN app has been criticized by frontline border agents themselves. Those are folks that are part of the union, folks that work in the government, mayors, tourism councils, chambers of commerce, our U.S. border partners. Actually, it would be easier just to list those who support it, and that's only the government, sir. It is adding delays. It's quadrupling the time at customs. We know that. That's on record. People are being wrongfully put under house arrest because of a glitch. It functionally does not keep up with the political health restrictions. It has been cited as having privacy issues. And the one-time secret exemption uncovered last week proves that it's not even about viral spread. So in the face of the overwhelming evidence on its problems and the criticism, why is the government not abandoning the mandatory use of ArriveCAN? And why are you instead making it permanent?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Landsman in January claimed that the vaccine mandate at our borders would lead to food shortage and empty shelves at our grocery stores. She was wrong. In May, she claimed that the transportation vaccine mandate as causing the congestion, and if we stopped it, it would solve the congestion problem. Once again, she was wrong. So I can tell you, Mr. Chair, Canadians would forgive me why I'm skeptical about her assessment. ArriveCan is not contributing to the congestion. In fact, ArriveCan is a useful tool that helps verify the vaccination status of an individual before arriving at our borders. If we didn't have ArriveCan, the processing of arrivals would take longer time because it would have to be done manually.
10 more seconds, Minister, please.
ArriveCan is actually helping process arrivals much faster and helping reduce congestions.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you, Ms. Landsman. Next, we have Ms. Koutrakis. Ms. Koutrakis, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for agreeing to appear before the Transport Committee today. And it's nice to see that your symptoms of COVID are very mild and that you're able to give us, from your busy schedule, 1 hour. Earlier, we heard from Ms. Landsman criticism that you are appearing here 1 hour instead of 2. And I just wanted to remind everyone who is watching us and listening that the standard for ministerial appearances at Transport Committee is in fact an hour. During the entire Harper government, which was almost 10 years, none of his various transport ministers appeared for longer than an hour at the Transport Committee meetings. Minister Alghabra also answered questions about airports when he last appeared at TRAN on May 30th. The officials appeared on this topic at TRAN on June 16. Unfortunately, we never got a chance to ask our questions to the relevant officials because the opposition members of this committee had preferred to deal with unrelated motion. And also, and least but not, less important, is a briefing was provided by officials on July 21 to members of both the Transport Committee and also the TRCM at the Senate. Minister, one of the main responsibilities of Transport Canada is security screening through CATSA. What concrete steps have you taken to improve CATSA screening times, and what are the results that we have seen so far?
Thank you very much, Ms. Koutrakis, for your question. And by the way, as I've stated before, I'm always happy to come back and once again answer questions of committee members, as I've done in the past if needed. From the beginning, when we started seeing the surge in demand, we worked with CATSA, and I know Mike Saunders is here today, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer your questions, and his team as well. I sat down with Mike late April, and we talked about the sense of urgency that is required to respond to the surge in demand that we're seeing. And to CATSA's credit, they put all hands on deck and worked with their partners on ensuring that they intensify and accelerated their hiring. Just so you know, let me take a step back. From the winter, we worked with CATSA on providing them additional resources in preparation for the restart of the aviation sector. In fact, it was in the estimates prior to congestion where CATSA was receiving additional funding to help them prepare for that. To summarize, just in the last 3 months, CATSA has hired 1,700 people. This is in an environment of labor shortage. There's more work that needs to be done. I'm not claiming that all the problems have been solved, but it's great to see a significant improvement in processing time. As I stated in my opening remarks today, within the 4 largest airports, 87% of passengers are screened within 15 minutes or less.
And we are seeing similar flight delays and cancellations occurring all over the world. Is it reasonable to say that these all have knock-on effects on other countries? And if so, what efforts, if any, are being made at the international level to better coordinate schedules to manage these effects?
Indeed, Ms. Koutrakis, we are seeing similar phenomena at many major airports around the world, from Heathrow to Amsterdam to many U.S. airports to Dublin, and the list goes on. This is an international phenomena, and again, at the heart of it is the surge in demand after 2 years of a significant reduction and layoffs that the industry is facing. So there is an imbalance between the desire of travelers to travel, but the ability and the labor available to provide those services. Undoubtedly, there needs to be better coordination among international partners to do everything we can. But indeed, like you said, there are knock-on effects across the world when one sector, this is a highly integrated sector with a just-in-time delivery service model, and any kind of impact will have ramifications across the world.
And I also wanted to dispel the comments that, again, my colleague previously, MP Lantzman, referred to ArriveCan as people being put under house arrest. I would like to clarify, and for the record, that has not been the case. No one has been placed on house arrest by having to use ArriveCan. And what is the rationale for maintaining the ArriveCan app, Minister, to the best of your knowledge? Why are we maintaining this app?
Canada, like several other countries around the world, continues to ask international arrivals to show their vaccination status. And ArriveCan enables travelers to provide a verification of their vaccination status electronically, so they are processed a lot faster than being done manually. So it actually does improve the efficiency of processing international arrival. And without it, we would be adding several minutes to each passenger as they arrive at our borders, and we would be causing more congestion at our borders.
Do we have any evidence, Minister, that the ArriveCan app is suppressing cross-border travel and tourism? Because, you know, tourism is very important. We have a wonderful country, and our neighbors to the south are wanting to visit our great nation. As far as you know, is there any evidence that this is being suppressed?
15-second response, please, Minister. Thank you.
There is no evidence, Ms. Katrakis. However, I am aware that several border communities have been flagging this as an issue, and we will continue to work with them on ensuring how we can increase the facilitation of international arrivals. But let me just state this. At airports, international arrivals currently at 99.5% compliance rates. That is almost 100%. There is no evidence whatsoever that ArriveCan is causing any problems.
Thank you, Minister. Merci beaucoup, Madame Katrakis.
Thank you, Ms. Katrakis. Next up, we have Mr. Vasseur Duval. You have the floor. You have 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, you seem to be the only person to think that ArriveCan is the pinnacle of all useful applications, but we have the labor union that says that it's slowing them down. Others saying that it's complicating things. Passengers are being threatened by fines of up to $5,000, and they apply to us because they don't really know what it takes to make this app a success. So faced with this, we are asking that you withdraw the application to take time to correct the mistakes. Why haven't you done that?
Mr. Chair, I thank you for the question. As I stated just now, ArriveCan enables CBSA and public health officers to ensure that international arrivals have their vaccination status accurately verified before entering Canada, as per public health measures that we have. Without ArriveCan, processing time for international arrivals would increase significantly. Having said that, I know that there are those who have some concerns about ArriveCan. And I know CBSA and the Minister of Public Safety and Transport Canada and others are going to work with all of our stakeholders to ensure that the tool does its job as efficiently as possible. But I can assure you, if we suspend ArriveCan today, it will add significant complications to the congestions that we have at our airports today.
Well, it's still surprising to hear because you're the only person to say that ArriveCan is reducing the waiting period, but Canada is actually #1 globally when it comes to wait times at airports. So we are looking to be convinced, but we remain skeptical. I think that you have implemented a program that's not finalized, that's not complete, and that has real impacts on the lives of people, and they have to go into quarantine without any justification, and they're under a lot of stress. So right now we see that passengers are being treated like guinea pigs. Do you think this is normal?
Mr. Chair, opposition members in the past claimed that the transportation vaccine mandate, which now has been suspended, was causing the congestion. They were wrong. I can tell you, they're wrong when they claim that ArriveCAN is causing congestions at our airport today. I have explained in all honesty and transparency the root causes of these congestions. We are working with our partners to address them. We're seeing significant improvements over the last 2 months that can be provided data to back it up. This is moving in the right direction. We will work with partners on ensuring that we can improve ArriveCAN. We address the concerns that people have, but it's not causing the congestions at our airports.
Mr. Minister, it looks like you almost joined us to praise the steps you've taken, but I don't think people see it the same way. Now, when it comes to plane tickets, people plan things ahead of time, weeks and months in advance, but you have completely failed in the planning aspect of things. There is a report that has to do with CATSA that was in the press in May, and in May they were missing 25% of staff. Now, things have picked up a bit, slightly improved in the month of August, but the problem was clearly on your end. So instead of taking action, you chose to blame airports and airlines. Why?
Mr. Chair, I mean, the report that my honorable colleague is referring to is exactly what I am saying right now. There is a labor shortage issue. And in May, all agencies and companies and airports had a massive labor shortage compared to the surge in demand that occurred then. We acted quickly. We were preparing for it, but the surge ended up being beyond what was expected, which is good news for the sector, but every player in the sector had to catch up. Significant improvements are taking place. I'm not here to applaud our government's action, Mr. Speaker. Or Mr. Chair, I'm here to applaud those who work on the front line in responding to the surge in demand. Let's recognize the progress that has taken place. Let's build confidence in our sector and acknowledge that there's still work to be done. But let's not dismiss the progress that has taken place over the last few weeks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Minister, on the 16th of June, the parliamentary secretary was saying in committee that the chaos and the airports, and they were saying this would have to do with micromanagement in daily operations. Now, today you're talking about your actions. You're saying that the situation is improving. So it looks like you've changed your stance on the issue. Now, you are trying to just absolve yourself of responsibility in this case. That's what it looks like.
Mr. Chair, I've been consistent since May. Labor shortage is the root cause of labor or airport congestions. Labor shortage at airports, labor shortage at airlines, labor shortage at other agencies. And there is an imbalance between the appetite of people who want to travel and the ability to service those who wanted to travel. Significant progress has taken place over the last few weeks. And we're seeing similar phenomena around the world. This is not just unique to Canada. This is part of the recovery from COVID public health measures that the world has witnessed over the last 2 years. This is not an excuse, Mr. Chair. These are the facts. And I am here to reaffirm our commitment to continue to work with our partners to ensure that we build on the successes that has taken place and continue to focus on addressing the remaining issues.
Thank you very much, Minister. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Barcelou.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelou Duval. Next up.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being with us today despite your illness. It's much appreciated because the topic we're discussing is one that affects thousands, if not millions, of Canadians. You mentioned in your opening remarks the extraordinary circumstances that we've seen over the past number of years. And that is indeed true. There's been obviously a global pandemic, a surge in travel and staffing shortages, and all of those have had an impact. But within that context, the treatment of air passengers has been atrocious. You mentioned people sleeping on the floors of our airports. The cancellations, the delays, the way that air passengers have been treated, both by the government and by the major airlines, has been nothing short of shameful. And I think everyone in this meeting has seen this firsthand traveling through Canada's major airports. Now, your government brought in with great fanfare the Air Passenger Bill of Rights, or the APPR, which was supposed to have air passengers' backs. Now, can you tell me with a straight face that those regulations have protected air passengers over the past year?
Mr. Chair, let me just also thank all of my colleagues for their well wishes.
Minister, I only have 6 minutes. I've got a lot of questions for you. So
okay, well, I'm glad you have a lot of questions, and that's why I'm here,
for sure.
Mr. Bacharach. Look, as I said, governments for decades didn't do anything about passenger bill of rights. We did something. We took action, and these regulations protect passenger rights. Currently, the CTA is going through several complaints, or thousands of complaints, that passengers have submitted. I want to encourage, let me just state unequivocally, it's unacceptable to see passengers sleep on the floor at airports. It's unacceptable. And while I want to avoid speaking about specific cases, as you can imagine, because I leave it up to the CTA to examine the merits of each case, but it's unacceptable, and there are standards that make sure that airlines fulfill their bargain. And CTA is responsible for going through these complaints and adjudicating them. And I am confident that they will do everything they can to uphold these regulations and to ensure that the airlines fulfill their end of the bargain.
Minister, what is the current backlog of complaints submitted to the CTA?
I am not 100% sure, but I think it's about maybe 15,000.
Okay, last time we checked, it was 18,000. The service standard for the CTA is 20 days to resolve a complaint. How long is it currently taking the CTA to resolve a passenger complaint?
Mr. Bacharach, the recent budget in April included an additional $11 million to the CTA to help them deal with their backlog. Now, the backlog has also increased. I recognize that. And I can assure you that my personal commitment and our government's commitment to continue to work with the CTA so they have the resources they need to address the backlog. The work that the CTA does is incredibly important for confidence in our aviation sector, for protecting passenger rights. And we provided additional resources, but I know that we need to continue working with the CTA at ensuring that they have the resources they need to address and clear the backlog.
So, Minister, let's say there's roughly a backlog of 18,000 complaints before the CTA. How many complaints has the CTA resolved over the past year?
I don't know the answer. I don't know if maybe I'll ask Deputy Minister or any of our team if they can answer that question.
Okay, well, I see Mr. Keenan getting ready there, but we're gonna have the officials next hour, so I'll save that question for the next hour. The CTA is also able to issue fines in situations of non-compliance, fines to the airlines up to $25,000. Are you aware of any fines being issued under the APPR directly related to the Passenger Bill of Rights?
Again, I need to look back. I think there were. I don't know if they're always made public, but again, I'll defer to officials to provide that information, whatever is at least publicly available.
So maybe, Minister, I'll ask you this. All of these questions have been about the CTA's area of jurisdiction. You've brought to this meeting a number of officials from different agencies. Why didn't you bring anyone from the CTA?
Look, Mr. Bacharach, the committee can invite whoever they want to. The CTA is a quasi-judicial independent body that adjudicates complaints independently. It is really important that the government supports the work of the CTA, but also avoids prejudging the outcomes of their decisions. So, and not to appear to be dictating to the CTA how to decide on the complaints that they have before them. So it is really important to respect the independence of the CTA while supporting them in fulfilling their mandate.
Minister, do you agree with me that the treatment of air passengers over the past year has been inappropriate, has been atrocious?
Mr. Bacharach, I said clearly there have been examples that were reported on in the media that were unacceptable and should not be tolerated. Again, I want to avoid speaking about a specific issue, not to prejudge the outcome of a CTA examination, but there have been horrific stories in the media that have been unacceptable.
Thank you very much, Minister,
okay.
and thank you very much, Mr. Bacharach. Next, for the second round, we have Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes. Mr. Barrett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, if there was no scientific basis for mandates, as has been indicated by officials, why would your government institute a policy that infringed on Canadians' rights, that didn't have scientific basis, and then call a snap election a couple days later?
You mean the non-scientific mandates that was implemented by municipal governments? You mean the non-scientific based mandates that was implemented by provincial governments? You mean the non-scientific based mandates that was implemented by the private sector without required from government? You mean the non-scientific based mandates that was implemented by universities? You mean the non-scientific based mandates that was
Minister, I'm talking about the mandates implemented by the federal government at airports.
Governments around the world.
I'd like to quote one of your officials in court documents that were reported on by Rupa Subramanya, and one of those officials is on the call today, actually, and let me quote in an email. To the extent that updated data exists or that there is clear evidence of the safety benefit of vaccination on the users or other stakeholders of the transportation system, it would be helpful to assist Transport Canada supporting its measures. That's a quote from ADM McCrory. Now, the mandates were set to be implemented, but your department didn't even have the information that that indicated it was necessary or based in science. To just circle back to your question about the science that's being followed by municipalities and provinces, they have all eliminated their mandates since, yet you have not. So if you're following the same science they are, why have they all lifted their mandates, but you have not?
Mr. Chair, first of all, let me start off by saying vaccines have proven to have saved lives and continue to save lives. At a moment in time where our public health system is under a lot of pressure, vaccines continue to be an incredible tool in saving lives and protecting the health and safety of Canadians and our healthcare system. The federal government has suspended most of our mandates. The only mandate that we have is at our borders, like many countries around the world. And it is done to ensure that we minimize the importation of the virus and that protect the health and safety of Canadians. And let me point my honorable colleague, on top of all studies that have been done over the last 2 years, just the last 2 months, 2 different studies. One was done by the Canadian Medical Association. One was done by UBC, the University of British Columbia, that demonstrated that these public health measures, including mandates, protect the health and safety, have saved upwards of 60,000 lives, have prevented the importation of the virus tenfold at our borders. So there's ample evidence that I'm happy to table with committee that provides justification for these vaccines.
Well, thanks very much. We look forward to you tabling that information. Over 60 countries around the world have abandoned all of their air travel pandemic restrictions, including most of our European allies. And, PHAC internal reports suggest that air travel had almost no impact on COVID community spread, less than 1%. So it is questionable why those would still be in place. The Minister, you're talking about, again, about science. The CDC in the United States, with whom we share a border, says that it makes the most sense not to differentiate between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, and that sub-jurisdictions don't need to start making mandates. So, Minister, let's talk about the mandates that you still have in place. What are the current regulations for air and train travel in Canada with respect to COVID-19?
Mr. Chair, there are still many countries around the world that require a proof of vaccination for international travel.
Your mandates, Minister. I've got less than a minute.
Second, currently, the Canadian government has suspended our vaccine mandate for our transportation sector, so there is no requirement for domestic or international travel for people who are leaving the country, whether they want to get on a plane or a train.
So, Minister, do you have to wear a mask on a train or a plane? And if someone does not, what should be the consequence for that person?
Currently, we maintain a mask wearing policy for federally regulated air or train sector. It is scientifically proven that masks reduce transmission upwards of 80%. We're doing everything we can to protect the health and safety of Canadians, and it is the prudent thing. In fact, it's the kind thing to do to protect
10 seconds,
those
please, Minister.
sitting next to you.
Minister, your Prime Minister was seen not wearing a mask on a train just mere weeks ago. Was that not prudent or kind of the Prime Minister?
You can follow up on that question at the next round, Mr. Baird, or perhaps one of your colleagues can. Thank you, Mr. Baird. Thank you, Minister. Next, we have Mr. Iacono. Mr. Iacono, la parole est à...
Mr. Iacono, you have the floor. You have 5 minutes.
Good day, colleagues. Good day, Minister. And I'm glad to see that the COVID symptoms have not been too harsh with you. I guess you are fully vaccinated, and it shows. Traveling post-COVID is like time travel. You really don't know what to expect. We will probably be able to write a post-pandemic management manual soon, but it sure doesn't exist yet, right, Minister?
Thank you very much, Mr. Iacono, for your question and well wishes. And indeed, you know, when COVID arrived, it did not arrive with an instruction manual, and governments around the world grappled with doing everything they can to protect their health and safety of their citizens. We are now going through a different phase of the pandemic as we are restarting our economy and certainly witnessing unprecedented phenomena. And we need to first of all, do everything we can to focus on addressing congestion causes and other type of disruptions to minimize the impact on our citizens, on our economy. But I also think it's an opportunity for us to learn from this phase that we're going through, and there will be a time to look back at and writing a manual, as you call it, Mr. Iacono, so we can learn from what we went through and make sure that we improve our systems for the future.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Can you explain to us the steps that were taken to prepare for the anticipated increase in passenger volumes?
Thank you, Mr. Iacono. First of all, let me just say, during COVID, when, as I explained, 90% of customers of the aviation sector had disappeared, we did everything we can to ensure that we maintain a resilient sector. So we made sure we provided access to wage subsidy so employers can retain as many of their employees as possible. We provided financial support to airports. We provided financial support to airlines. We provided rent deferrals and infrastructure funding to help airports prepare and to help airlines remain resilient during an unprecedented time. And then as we were planning for the restart, we ensured that we worked with government agencies like CBSA and CATSA and others to prepare them, and the CTA to prepare them for what we predicted will have an increase in demand. As everyone knows today, that the surge in demand far exceeded many predictions, but we did everything we can to prepare for it. But we are seeing that the private sector, that the public sector, that all sectors of our economy have been grappling with this restart, with the surge in demand, and have been working on ensuring that labor shortage that we're experiencing is addressed as quickly as possible.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Why did the Pearson and Trudeau airports especially get such bad results when it comes to delayed flights in July. Are we seeing signs of improvement? Have you seen signs since?
Indeed, Mr. Iacono, we have been seeing significant signs of improvements, and as I highlighted some of them in my opening remarks. Having said that, again, Canada, first of all, we're seeing delays across the world, but Canada is somewhat unique in the fact that the hole that the airline sector and the aviation sector is coming out of was deeper than many other countries. And I gave an example. Canada's increase in travel between January and August was 252% compared to 63% that we saw in the United States. So while Canadian airports and airlines have gone through similar experiences of labor shortages around the world, but the hole that they're coming out of was deeper. Therefore, the acceleration out of it was faster, and we saw significant delays. But now there's evidence that we are moving in the right direction, and credit goes to those who work in the airports and airlines and government agencies who've been working really hard at addressing these causes.
Thank you, Minister. The problems at airports seem too often to occur at peak hours. What is being done to avoid the large number of arrivals and departures occurring at the same time?
10-second response, please, Minister.
Yeah, look, we are seeing airports and airlines work together at addressing the scheduling issues. We saw airlines make a difficult but the right decision to cut back on some of their scheduled flights to ensure that they're able to service the demand. So there have been several important steps that have been taken to manage the peak. But again, we need to continue to observe and monitor the situation and respond to ensure that we address all of these issues.
Merci, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Mr. Iacono. Next up, we have Mr. Barcelo-Duval. Mr. Barcelo-Duval, you have the floor. You have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Minister, as Bloc Québécois, we suggested that the air passenger protection regulations that apply to airline companies should also apply to the government and government agencies. This would enable us to make sure that passengers will be compensated when they have canceled or delayed flights due to mismanagement or incompetence from the federal government. This would prevent maybe a culture of impunity because right now there are no consequences to the government not taking care of issues or solving problems. Do you envisage applying these regulations to the federal side as well?
Mr. Chair, these regulations are done to protect passengers who enter into a commercial agreement with airlines to receive a service that they paid for. Governments, citizens are always able to hold governments accountable through their members of parliament, through elections, through various means. But passengers, for the longest time, had no recourse to ensure that airlines that they paid money to are able to provide the service that they paid for. That's the intention of these regulations. Is there an opportunity for us to continue to improve it? Sure, I am happy to work with my colleagues on figuring out how we can improve these regulations, but they are intended to protect passengers who enter into a commercial contract with airlines so they receive the service that they paid for.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. This is a bit interesting because consumers have no recourse when flights are canceled or delayed because of the government. So we are imposing rules and standards to companies, but the government isn't applying the same standards. It's a question of being coherent. So we can also talk about leaked documents that show that Air Canada has asked its staff to lie to passengers about the reasons for flight cancellations in order not to pay compensation. So even if the consumers actually complain, there's a backlog of 18,000 complaints, so their complaints will not be treated right away. So consumers associations are actually asking consumers to go to courts directly, bypassing this entity. So this organization is supposed to be the watchdog of passengers' rights, but it's completely inefficient. What do you think about this? A very short response, Minister, if possible.
Mr. Chair, the CTA is an independent quasi-judicial body that is adjudicating these complaints independently. I can assure you that I have confidence in their ability to do their work, and that our government will continue to assist them to ensure that they have the resources they need to protect passengers. I understand that recently the CTA issued a ruling that labor shortage could not be claimed as safety matter. So the CTA looks at individual complaints and adjudicates them based on the circumstances and the evidence before it.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Mr. Vasseur-Duval. Next up.
The floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Minister, I'll pick up where my colleague left off. On December 29th, Air Canada issued an internal memo stating that effective immediately flight cancellations due to crew are considered as within carrier control for safety, and further that passengers will no longer be eligible for APPR claims / monetary compensation. Does this reflect your understanding of the spirit of the air passenger protection regulations?
Mr. Bacharach, the CTA is responsible for adjudicating the complaints, and they will look at each complaint independently and objectively. As you can imagine, I want to avoid to prejudge individual complaints. Having said that,
so Minister,
I do not feel that labor issues in Spirit can be used as a justification for safety standards.
Thank you for that, Minister. Now, you've repeatedly said that the CTA is an independent body, and yet Cabinet and yourself as Minister of Transport are ultimately accountable. You created the legislation, you created the regulations, and you're responsible for the CTA. Now, Section 43 of the Canadian Transportation Act empowers you and Cabinet to issue policy directives to the CTA. Will you use this in light of what has happened to air passengers over the past year, in light of the fact that airlines continue to treat passengers in such atrocious ways when it comes to delays and cancellations? Will you use this policy directive to strengthen the APPR?
Mr. Bacharach, to use your point and to give you an example of how our government and the Minister of Transport utilize that ability, we actually issued a directive to the CTA, given the lessons that we learned from COVID about areas outside of control of the airlines. And we have issued a directive so they can reform the regulation, so it's now strengthened. And in fact, as of September 8th, we have new set of rules that will take effect to improve the regulations. Now, moving forward, I think there's an opportunity for us to work together on looking at what else can we do to continue to improve and build on the regulations that we have. And I'm happy to work with you and other colleagues on figuring out what else can be done.
Thank you very much,
Chair.
Mr. Bacharach, and thank you, Minister. Next, we have Mr. Baldinelli. Mr. Baldinelli, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, a Canadian traveler recently left this public comment on TripAdvisor, and I quote, "Just got back from a trip to Nevada, flying out of Buffalo, and I'm from Ontario. The airport is a dream, no lineups, quick through TSA checkpoints. The airport is super clean." He also added, "It was a quick drive over to the airport, no COVID testing required. Crossing across the U.S. border is easy. They only ask if you're vaccinated and do not ask to see your test. I have crossed 3 times in the past 2 months. Same thing every time. Coming back across the border at the Rainbow Bridge, there were about 10 cars in front of us, and it took forever to get to a booth. So anyone thinking of ditching Pearson Airport and traveling down to Buffalo, do it. It's worth it." Minister, Niagara Falls is the #1 tourism leisure destination in all of Canada. Yet every taxpayer dollar that Destination Canada spends in international markets, including our prime market, the United States, for our border communities, is being wasted by headlines that continually hit the press talking about Pearson Airport being the worst airport in the world. My colleague has just mentioned this. 60 countries around the world have abandoned all air travel pandemic restrictions, including most of our European allies. So why does this government continue to cling to these restrictions which only do a disservice and disincentivize travel to this country?
Good question.
Mr. Chair, it helps no one to undermine confidence in our aviation sector and in our institution. I acknowledge the fact that in Canadian airports and airlines, we've witnessed and continue to witness some congestion similar to what we're seeing around the world, including in the United States. I also acknowledge that we have currently the only public health measures at our borders is requiring proof of vaccination, by the way, just like the US and many countries around the world. And work is being done on a daily basis to address these congestion issues, and the evidence proves that things are getting better. More work is needed, but things are getting better. I want to ask my honorable colleague if he really cares about the fluidity of our borders. Why did he and his colleagues support these blockaders who blocked our borders, for weeks, prevented Canadians and others from...
Minister, the question period is to me now. And if you had done your job, Minister, and spoken to stakeholders, including the federally bridge that you regulate in Fort Erie, the Fort Erie Peace Bridge Authority, you appoint members of that commission. They can tell you about the border delays, about traffic being down 50%, Minister, yet wait times are up almost over 2 hours, and yet you've done nothing. Minister, you have a hard time responding to correspondence from them, and they're your commission that you regulate. So why are you continuing to put disincentives to travel to this country? 40,000 people in my community work in the tourism sector, and they're being impacted. And we've lost 2 tourism years because of COVID. This year, if we lose it, it's self-inflicted, and there's nobody to blame but this Liberal government. When are you going to take actions? Who told you, Minister, that ArriveCAN is not having any impact on wait times?
Mr. Chair, setting aside the bluster there, we continue to do everything we can to protect the health and safety of Canadians and facilitating smooth border crossing for all travelers. And we have had all hands on deck, whether it is at airports or land borders. My colleagues and I have been working with border communities to ensure that they have the tools they need to facilitate safe and efficient border crossing. Mr. Chair, the public health measures that we have.
Who have you spoken to, Minister? Have you spoken to the stakeholders? Have you spoken to the bridge commissions? Have you spoken to the tourism stakeholders? My understanding is the Liberal caucus was meeting recently in Niagara Falls, the Ontario caucus. Did they meet with any stakeholders to hear from them directly about the impact that it's having on my community? Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, I know my colleague Vance Badaway is here, a member of the committee, who's been a proud and a vocal advocate on behalf of the Niagara region, who has been a champion for the Great Lakes, who've been a champion for the communities, who have been working...
Then why aren't you listening to them?
...collaboratively with our ministers, who've been working collaboratively with stakeholders. I have met with stakeholders. I've met with experts in tourism, and we will continue to do
10 more seconds, please, Minister.
To ensure...
Why does it take you months to respond to your own government agency that reports to you?
A safe and efficient travel. It's unfortunate that the Conservatives never taken COVID seriously. It's unfortunate that the Conservatives supported these illegal blockades that blocked our borders and had a massive impact on border communities, have not apologized for it to this day. But we, on the other hand, Mr. Chair, are focused...
Minister, they're going to hold a parade in Buffalo for you.
Thank you very much,
Their
Mr.
Chamber of Commerce is going to hold a parade for you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldinelli, and thank you, Minister. The last 5 minutes of the first hour will go to Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interesting meeting. Minister, thank you, first of all, for being here today. It's good that you're trying to implement the business of good government versus the business of good politics, as we're seeing on the other side of the floor. With that said, Mr. Minister, I know we have very limited time left, but I do want to ask you one question with respect to back on the subject with respect to flight delays. And we are seeing similar flight delays, as mentioned by earlier by a colleague, as well as cancellations occurring all over the world, as well as here in Canada. Is it reasonable to say that that these all have what we would call knock-on effects on other countries? And if so, what efforts, if any, are being made at the international level to better coordinate schedules to manage these very effects?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Mr. Badaway, for the question. Indeed, the industry is highly integrated, and as you stated, we're seeing similar phenomena around the world. And when one corner of the world is experiencing congestion, other connected areas feel the impact. So we also know that other airports are feeling similar challenges of labor shortages as we are recovering from COVID and similar congestions. To answer your point, yes, there are opportunities for us to work with international partners, including, by the way, Canada is the host of ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, where there will be a meeting happening this fall, hosted in Montreal. And we're all proud of the work that we're doing in hosting such a body. So this would be one opportunity for us to work together with our international partners on learning together, sharing best practices, learning lessons, and working together on how we can improve the standards that the industry has around the world.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. And I do want to attach my next question to some of the comments from Mr. Baldinelli, somewhat radical to some nature, but I do want to be very specific and more in tune with what the reality of what's happening here in Niagara actually is. In particular, as it relates to the efforts that yourself and Minister Mendicino in particular, as well as Minister Boissonnault, have made in the last few months in meeting with the stakeholders here in Niagara to hear first right the facts, not the rhetoric or the perception by some members of Parliament, but the facts. And to that, can you tell us what you've heard from, for example, Ron Rhinus from the Peacebridge, the General Manager of the Peacebridge Authority, from Tim Clutterbuck, the Chair of the Board of the Peacebridge Authority, as well as other stakeholders throughout both Niagara Falls, Niagara Centre, my riding, as well as West Niagara and into St. Catharines. What have you heard, and what are some of the efforts that yourself and other members of Cabinet are taking on behalf of those that express their concerns to you?
Mr. Badaway, let me just say that I read the emails that you send me on a regular basis that provides me the information coming from the bridge on traffic and performance. And let me say that it's great that we're seeing still continue to improve traffic and increase in traffic at our border crossing, including Peacebridge and other international borders. Second, I know that the community has been flagging the concern that they have. There's still some issues of awareness of ArriveCAN for many land border travelers, which is different than air travelers. So I have been taking that input, examining it on a regular basis, working with our colleagues on making sure that we figure out what else can be done to improve the efficiency and the fluidity of these land border crossing. So I'm grateful to your work. I'm grateful to those who are on the front line. I recognize that there are some questions, and we continue to be more than willing to work with you and others on responding to these questions, on figuring out what else we can do to improve the traveler's experience.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badaway, and that concludes the first hour of questioning. Minister, on behalf of all members, I want to thank you once again for your appearance, particularly given what you're battling right now, and we wish you the best of health in the days and weeks ahead. Colleagues, if it's okay with you, we'll move on directly. Thank you, Minister. We'll move directly on to questioning in the second hour, and seeing as how there are no opening remarks, we will begin the second hour of questioning with Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks to the officials for being here today. Has ArriveCAN caused delays?
Mr. Keenan, I think you're trying to speak, if I'm not mistaken, but we can't hear you.
Apologies, Mr. Chair. Deputy Keenan's mic isn't working. He was going to suggest that perhaps Denis Vanette from the Canada Border Services Agency could take this question.
Okay, Mr. Vanette, the floor is yours.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Okay, thanks. I made a small technical adjustment to my computer, but Mr. Chair, I would still stand with the suggestion that Denis Vanette from CBSA answer this question.
Thank you, Mr. Vanette.
Thank you for the question.
And so, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Mr. Chair, the ArriveCAN app is actually the vehicle for the provision of the medical information, the public health information that is mandated through the Order in Council as issued by the Public Health Agency of Canada. And without the use of the ArriveCAN, for which we receive the information 99.5% of the time in advance in air and in marine, and just over 90% in land, that information would need to be collected either by paper submission or orally for capture and input by a CBSA officer. And so without the ArriveCAN, it would take far greater time to process individuals than it currently takes. And you can recall a period of time back in March and April of 2020 when this was being captured on paper. And we had significant delays at Canadian airports and at land borders. And so it's been a very efficient tool to allow for the capture of that public health information. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the response there. I think that that's a contrast from the experience that that folks have. That's a contrast with what I'm hearing from frontline officers with CBSA in my community. That's a contrast with what we're hearing from our international partners, that this has dramatically increased wait times at the border for a public health measure that is not or a supposed public health measure that is not keeping Canadians safe. If the purpose is simply to verify vaccination, and we're matching that of our American partners, they don't ask for a demonstration of proof. They just simply ask the question. I'm wondering if the officials would be prepared to table documents related to the continued use of ArriveCAN. I referenced in my comments to the minister, or my questions to the minister, the justification that was requested in the summer of 2021. I'm wondering if they could table with the committee, if they could agree to table with the committee the justification for its continued use.
Mr. Chair, I'm just doing a signal check. Is my audio coming through?
It is indeed, Mr. Keenan.
Great. We could. I would repeat one point my colleague from CBSA made, which is that the ArriveCAN is a tool for efficiently collecting information that the Government of Canada requires travelers to submit as part of its ongoing COVID protection measures under the interim order under the Quarantine Act administered by the Public Health Agency of Canada. Second point is we would be happy to provide additional documentation. There's a lot of documentation on those orders, the rationale, and how ArriveCAN contributes to operationalizing the high volume of people crossing the border.
Thank you. So I would just say through you, Mr. Chair, that it's very efficient. I've crossed into the United States several times. I'm asked by Homeland Security agents if I'm vaccinated, and I say yes, and that's the end. So it's still an offense to lie, and so it seems excessive and redundant at best. So I had referenced some documents, again, some court documents that had been reported on that quoted one of the officials that we've got on our meeting today. And I'm wondering if he's able to speak to if it is standard practice for the government to create a policy and then ask for the supporting evidence for that policy after the policy has been created on the eve of its implementation. Is that standard?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to start off with a key point on the premise of that question and then turn it over to Mr. McCrory to further elaborate. I think a really important point here is that I think the members are referring to media reports about the information filed by Transport Canada in a court case on the vaccine mandate. What the media failed to report was that Transport Canada tabled and provided extensive evidence, scientific evidence, on the rationale for the vaccine mandate. That was not in the media report, but it was in the testimony and the filings of Transport Canada. We would be happy if it would serve the committee to provide a copy of that information that was actually presented by Transport Canada in court. I think the second point of context I'd like to provide is that throughout the sort of 2+ years of COVID, COVID has not stood still, and we have been evolving and adjusting the health measures at the border and in the transportation system throughout. In that process, we constantly seek updated information from Public Health Agency of Canada. And so there's an ongoing process of pulling information in from the Public Health Agency of Canada as part of our work and using their expertise and health measures to guide the development of our measures.
Thanks for that reply, Mr. Keenan. I guess in tabling that information with the committee, it would be important for you to note if that evidence was provided to Transport Canada before the policy was made, or if the policy was made before the evidence was provided.
I can answer that for you now, Mr. Chair, that significant health evidence was provided to Transport Canada throughout the entire period of COVID. And so from months and months and months before the vaccine mandate, as well as after.
Thank you very much, Mr. Keenan. And just a quick note about the audio. I believe I'm hearing from our clerk that you have not selected your microphone. I think that's the only step that we have left.
I apologize, and I recognize how important this is.
Not a worry at all. We'll give you a couple seconds to clear that up, and then we'll move on to Mr. Chahal. Yeah, your switch might actually be on the line itself, the in-line itself, Mr. Keenan. Is that possible?
How about now?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Keenan.
Thank you.
Next question, Matt.
Mr. Chair, thank you for your patience on this. I apologize.
No worries at all, Mr. Keenan. Poshan Matt, next we have Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for joining us today, and the Minister taking time out of his schedule to do so as well, and hope you're feeling better and a quick recovery. I just want to start, I've been to a number of airports over the last few months, and some have been busy, and I haven't maybe had the same experiences as others. My experiences has been great through all the airports I've been through. I was through Toronto Pearson just last week, and I was telling friends and family, they thought I was going to be delayed. And I said I was through the lineups and security in under 5 minutes. So I was really impressed with the great work that officials were doing there at security and helping process travelers through. So my experience was great and quick and efficient. I know other airports across the country have had challenges, and I'd like to know, and my travels mostly go through Calgary Airport, and I've never had to wait very long. So I'd like to know, as there are some particular problems at some of our major airports, how have Calgary and Edmonton airports been doing when it comes to traffic and passenger movement? I think Mr. Keenan, maybe yourself.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'd say two things. In terms of Calgary first, Calgary, interestingly enough, has had a really strong rebound in traffic. The Canadian air travel system has gone from a very low level, as the minister indicated, to 81% of what you would normally see in a busy summer. Calgary, as of last week, was up to 86%, so it was a little heavy. And the Calgary airport has, in terms of security screening, there were, as the minister indicated, there were challenges at security screening and other areas adjusting to the rapid growth. Calgary is shared in that experience, but actually its numbers were pretty good. And in fact, I think I'd turn it over to our CATSA colleagues, but I think on security screening, and CBSA may wish to comment on this, on both CBSA processing on arrivals and on security screening, Calgary's doing a little better than the average of the top four. So there is variation airport by airport, but Calgary tends to be on the positive side.
Thank you for that. And maybe I'll jump into for CBSA, maybe Mr. Vinet, for yourself. Can you comment, and as we've had this conversation, and please add to what Mr. Keenan has just stated, that a lot of the challenges that I've been hearing are staffing shortages at the U.S. Customs and Border Security on that end. Can you tell me and tell committee, what have you observed and how is that affecting operations at our airports?
Regretfully, I can't speak to the U.S. pre-clearance operations. I know public safety is heavily engaged with their Department of Homeland Security counterparts, Transport Canada, the CBSA to a much lesser extent. Just to speak to the interest in what we have seen in terms of the capacity that is being sought in terms of restoring air transportation. So either a question for our Transport Canada colleagues or our public safety colleagues who aren't here today. Apologies.
I could add briefly to what Denny just said, is that it's exactly that, Mr. Chair. We've seen all airports, all agencies have really around the world have been struggling to adjust to this big increase in traffic. The sharp increase in Canada has CBSA struggled to adjust. They've had some amazing progress in Pearson, and we now have the Customs Hall at Pearson flowing much better than it was a month ago or 2 months ago. CBP in the pre-clearance in Montreal and Toronto is there are some issues in terms of backups, and particularly in early morning flights. Going out of those two airports into the U.S. in terms of the CBP processing capacity. And you see that in terms of it's even affected the CATSA numbers in Toronto and Montreal. The longest waits you see at CATSA are actually for those pre-clearance lines, because CATSA has to slow down to avoid putting too many people into the waiting room of U.S. CBP. We are working with our American counterparts, colleagues. They're engaged with us, and we are working together, seeking solutions where we can get the throughput through CBP and the pre-clearance in Toronto and Montreal higher, consistent with the demand to travel between Canada and the U.S.
Thank you for clarifying that. And I think that's helpful for everybody listening today, that many of those challenges are working with our neighbors in that clearance and pre-clearance going to the U.S. The next question, I want to go to Ms. Lutfala from PHAC. And are you available? Just want to make sure. My question is on masking. The rationale for masking, and does it still apply? If you could provide some comments on that. We've seen for over the last number of years a conversation on masking. We've seen early on here in Alberta a lack of action by many prominent conservatives on this issue on implementing masking, and then cities taking it into their own hand to do so to protect their citizens. So I want to know, from a public health perspective, the rationale for required masking, and does it still apply?
So are you referring to masking within the context of a flight?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to pass it off on to my Transport Canada colleagues, but I would point out that we have assessed the masking, and obviously it is a public health measure that would protect you as an individual, as well as people around you, by creating a barrier for any exchange of fluids in conversation and so forth. But with respect to the regulatory regime that would support that with transport, that would for airlines, it would be with Transport Canada.
So do you still believe it protects folks on transmission, and that we should continue on having masking as a protection for folks traveling?
According to the advice that has been, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback in my. Can you hear me?
We can. Unfortunately, there isn't time left, however, for the response.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chahal. Next, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Next up, we have Mr. Barcelou Duval. You have 6 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question will be for Mr. Keenan. When it comes to the use of ArriveCAN, I imagine there's data that is collected and used for different purposes. I think there's a number of 87% or 90% of people use it. Do you also collect data on the bugs and problems and the nature of these problems to understand whether these are fixed and how long it takes and the impact it has? Do you have information on that? Because it might be relevant that if such data exists, that it be transmitted to the committee.
Mr. Chair, je donne la parole à collègue d'AFP.
Mr. Chair, I would like to hand it over to our CBSA colleague to answer this question.
Oui, merci pour la question. Depuis le début.
Thank you for the question. Since the introduction of the application, we've had about more than 80 versions to continue to improve the utility of the tool and to adjust to the health measures that also evolved based on different orders. So we were always made sure to do testing with Google and Apple to make sure that everything was in order, that the app was in proper shape, and it could be made available to passengers. And we have kept a database, if you will, with information on elements that needed fixing in different versions or along the lines of different recommendations we received. Thank you. Just to confirm the information you provided, Mr. Vinette, there have been more than 80 versions of the application which came in the aftermath of changes in government policy or bugs that were detected. Is it the case? Yes, it is the case. Would you be able to give me a number or different numbers, data that might be relevant, just to understand, okay, initially we had 1,000 bugs and then 500 bugs in August. Would you have like an idea on that? I don't have the data, unfortunately, to answer this question, but most recently in the media, there was mention of 10,000 people or so using Apple phones, iPhones, who were impacted from for a couple-week period, and it took a couple of weeks to fix the situation. People were receiving emails to quarantine, so we detected these cases. We passed this information on to different colleagues, and this was fixed. Okay. So we are hearing from citizens about fines going up to $5,000 if they do not follow the directive. If it's a first offense, if it's the first time, this $5,000 fine would probably not apply according to another directive. But would you have an idea on the number of fines issued and the total monetary value? I would hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Lutfalla, on the fines, but we do collect the information coming through ArriveCAN, and it is there is a 14-day quarantine. We also have information that 80 to 90% of people on a first trip, they actually make use of the application. Thank you.
So in terms of non-compliance with ArriveCAN and the potential monetary penalties that could be imposed on individuals, I just want to point out that our officers at the airports as well as land borders try to bring people into compliance rather than writing a ticket as the first measure. So
we're playing a much more facilitative role. A ticket is not the first option that is exercised by our officers to bring compliance with the ArriveCan app. Since the inception, or since ArriveCan was made mandatory for both land and air, and I think it was in 2020 for air and 2021 for land, there's only been, I believe it's been 190 tickets with respect to ArriveCan non-compliance. In those cases, and they're very limited cases when you consider the overall number of travelers coming into our country, those individuals are individuals who are repeat offenders or simply will not comply with either giving us a paper submission, because we do offer that when they are referred over to BAC, or they just don't want to comply with the public health measures. So I want to underscore that the ticket amount, the number of tickets that have been issued have been extremely low for ArriveCan non-compliance, because our officers play a very facilitative role, and generally they are very successful in bringing people back into compliance with the law.
My next question will be for Mr. Vinette, but maybe someone else can answer as well. So during the pandemic, when we had quarantines in place, there were a lot of questions and reaction against how quarantines were being followed, and if there was any follow-up, because in some situations that wasn't the case. So I would like to know if the follow-up right now is effective and how it's being done. This would be a question for my colleague, Ms. Latvala.
Multi-pronged approach that's being used for quarantine follow-up. Quarantine is generally applied for individuals who are unvaccinated or deemed unvaccinated because they were unable to provide us vaccine credentials. We at the Public Health Agency, we have if you want to call it an escalation protocol, where we will start with phone calls. There will be reminders that are sent through ArriveCan to remind individuals of their quarantine as well as their testing obligations. We also have callers who will contact these individuals directly to make sure that they maintain their compliance with their quarantine requirement. But also these individuals, these callers, will call individuals who test positive to ensure that they meet the isolation requirements.
Thank you very much, Ms. Latvala. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you off there. Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelona.
Thank you, Mr. Barcelona-Duval.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin my questioning with the officials who are here from CATSA. Now, at past meetings, I've asked about the Summer Attendance Incentive Program, which is a program that CATSA's contractors have put in place using public money to offer a financial incentive to screening officers and other CATSA employees who don't take their booked summer holidays and don't take any sick time over the summer months. Now, in my past questioning, the response from CATSA has been that this was put in place to address absenteeism. And I wonder if the officials from CATSA could define absenteeism for me.
Thank you very much for the question. Just to make one clarification, it's not the incentive program was not offered to CATSA employees. It was offered to the screening contractors, to the screening officers across the country.
Sure, fair enough. But these employees wear CATSA badges on their shoulders. So you'll forgive me if we don't conflate the two. These are employees working for CATSA contractors, and this program uses public money through CATSA in order to provide the incentive to address absenteeism. How do you define absenteeism?
Absenteeism is actually, I think I would actually defer to my colleague Neil Perry to define the absenteeism as per this program. I believe he's responded to you not on that particular element of this program, but on other elements of it.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to respond to that. There's different types of absenteeism, and I'll make a clarification, as I did at my last appearance, between what the incentive is intended to achieve. We want to incent screening officers from coming into work for their scheduled shift when they are not sick and when they are not on vacation. And so there are different types of absenteeism, as you point out. There's absenteeism when you're sick, and we trust our screening officers to act professionally as they've done throughout the pandemic and not come to work when they're sick. And they've demonstrated that for over 2 years during the pandemic, that they would stay home and be responsible. When they have planned vacation, we encourage them to take it because, we've talked about for almost 2 hours now, it is an extremely busy environment, and they have done a noble job under these circumstances, under these pressures. However, there is the occurrence from time to time at different locations where, for a scheduled shift, that there are something called book-offs, and we are trying to reduce that by offering our contractors the opportunity to bill us for their programs. And those programs allow that if you are sick for a couple of days, you are not disqualified from the incentive program. For the further weeks throughout the summer, you can earn up to $200 per cycle for coming in for your scheduled shift.
So, Mr. Perry, what you've just said contradicts the documents that we've seen from CATSA contractors, which very clearly indicate that if workers take sick time, they are disqualified from receiving the bonus for the week in which they took that time. Are you aware of this?
I am aware of this, and that doesn't contradict what I just said. What I said is if they are sick or away that week, they qualify for the other weeks that they show up for their scheduled shift. And so they continue to be eligible. They're not disqualified from the program. I'm aware of the documents. I have seen all of the memos issued by our contractors. Some of them have been amended since. I believe the copy that you had at our last meeting. There's further clarifications within those memos that talk to what's eligible. This is a program that was rolled out quickly. We worked with our contractors. There was a number of questions they received from their union representatives. We went back with them to clarify that we don't want to see people disqualified. We want to ensure that they can take their vacation, and that if they are sick, that we want them to stay well. But we also want them to continue to be eligible for those weeks to show up for their shift when they're not sick or on vacation.
So to be clear, Mr. Perry, if I am working for a CATSA contractor, I wake up with a sore throat, I stay home to protect my coworkers and the traveling public, do I still qualify for the $200 a week bonus for that week in which I stayed home
for that
sick
week?
for
You
one
do
day?
not, but you qualify for your paid sick leave. So your normal benefits and compensation apply, but the incentive program, which is 12 separate increments, is available for whichever increments that officer can avail themselves of it.
So, Mr. Perry, can you not see how this puts workers in a very difficult situation? Because essentially, you wake up with a sore throat and you're making that decision about whether to go into work, and there's $200 on the line. Is this not an incentive to go to work sick?
We don't see it as an incentive to go to work sick, because screening officers without this incentive are entitled to all of their base compensation, which includes their hourly wage, their health and dental benefits, paid sick leave, paid holiday. This is supernumerary to that compensation. So they're not out of pocket in any capacity. The incentive program is an additional bonus structure that they can avail themselves of when it's the best opportunity for them.
Yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. They would get $200 if they went in sick with a sore throat. They would get the $200, and they lose the $200 bonus if they stay home. Have the unions conveyed concern about this program directly to CATSA?
I'd have to verify on that. We generally, the unions convey their concerns directly to their employers.
Okay, and am I clear to understand then that that CATSA has no issues with the way that this program is currently being rolled out?
I would say that the program is showing that it is working as an effective, and that our absenteeism throughout the country has been down over the summer.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much,
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Perry, and thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach. Next, we have Ms. Landsman. Ms. Landsman, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thanks for coming. I'm going to go back to ArriveCan. I think given the experience and the major criticism by almost every stakeholder across the industry, from travel, from tourism, to those concerned with privacy, I'd like to know if the department has spoken to anyone outside of itself who supports it. Can you name anyone that you've consulted with regarding ArriveCan?
Mr. Chair, I might
don't know which department you're referring to, the honorable members are referring to, but I could offer one comment on this, and perhaps my colleagues at CBSA would like to comment. One, it's an important point of context that the ArriveCan operates at the land border and the air border, and here we're talking about air congestion. One of the very challenging situations we had in air congestion was getting people through fast enough the customs hall at Pearson. And as the ministers indicated earlier in this ramp up of travel, you saw some significant incidences of planes being held at the gate and the metering of passengers into the customs hall. We have an airport operations recovery group of airports, airlines, all the partners, and including Transport, CBSA, PHAC, CATSA, and a lot of work was done to try and work through how to fix that. And a number of changes were made that have proven to be very successful, because the actual the number of holds for international arrivals has dropped 90%. It was like 300 a week in May when we were at about 65,000 people arriving a day. It's now down to like 40 a week, even though we have 90,000 people per day arriving. A number of changes were made in the management of the customs hall. Colleagues in CBSA.
I had a question about the. I'm gonna pipe in here because I only have a couple minutes, so I'm gonna ask it a different way. Everybody here on this call has implied that the app is only necessary due to the mandate. So if the government removes the mandates one day, if it decides to do that, would the department's view be that there is no need for ArriveCan?
To answer the first question, in that work, we worked with all of the partners and managed to get the ArriveCan app, the ArriveCan completion rate up much higher for international arriving passengers, and that was the work with the entire industry. So there was a lot of engagement with the industry on this. They worked with us, and that was one of the key success factors in declogging the customs hall. So there has been extensive discussion with our operating partners on ArriveCan, and the fact that a lot fewer people are arriving at the customs hall with it incomplete has been a key success factor in getting people through. On your second question, I think it's difficult to speculate on the second question simply because it is, given the policy the government has today in terms of the information that is being required from passengers to ensure safe international travel, it is the completion of ArriveCan is a major force in the gains and the efficiency in the airport we're seeing now.
So it's I'm going to go back to you said of a 99% compliance rate with ArriveCan. That's what we've heard, or plus 99% compliance with ArriveCan. I'm going to turn your attention to somebody named Mark Weber. He's the president of the Customs and Immigration Union, representing border agents. And he says that it's that high because of assistance on filling out ArriveCan. He says the number is more like 70%. So which number is true? And in terms of looking at that 99%, are you misleading? Are you being misled on the compliance rate? Because there's a very big difference between those who come ready with it done and CBSA agents being taken away from their work to help people do it, because that's what we're hearing.
I would say one thing and then quickly turn it over to Mr. Vanette on this. And on the premise of your question, agree. And in fact, a lot of work was done in the context of international arrivals in air to get passengers to complete ArriveCan before they went to the customs hall. Because if they went into the customs hall without ArriveCan done, it clogged up an extremely busy part of Pearson Airport. So getting that rate of completion up before they go in the hall was one of the key reasons why we've been able to have make such progress in the flow of international arrivals at Pearson. In terms of the statistics, I would turn it over to a colleague at CBSA to comment further.
Unfortunately, we don't have time. Excuse-moi, Monsieur Vinette, on n'a pas de temps.
I'm sorry, Mr. Vinette, we don't have time, unfortunately.
Mr. McDonald, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to say a big thank you to my colleague, the MP for Bjorn Bonavista Trinity, for asking me to fill in for him at this committee meeting today. We've heard a lot today about one topic in particular, the Airline Passengers Bill of Rights. And that was pushed by a good friend of mine who lives not too far from my home, here in the same town as I live. And he was at it for years, a man by the name of Woodrow French. And finally, a government listened. And that government was the Liberal government, and it was, I think, Minister Garneau at the time. I want to ask the officials, does the Airline Passenger Bill of Rights do what it was intended to do when it comes to protecting airline passengers? And should it be tweaked if it's not doing its intended end of the day kind of protection for anyone using our airlines, whether it domestically or commercially?
I think the Mr. Chair, the answer to the question is that as the member indicated, the airline passenger protection, the airline passenger rights regime that Minister Garneau brought in several years ago, came in just before the pandemic, has made a significant difference in terms of how passengers are treated. But it also is it's the first time we've had a comprehensive set of passenger rights in Canada. And in the context of COVID, we've discovered that it actually does need changes. And in fact, one area where it needed an adjustment is that the system hadn't contemplated a massive disruption of air travel on the scale that we saw with COVID in March of 2020. And that's the reason that the Minister of Transport brought forth regulations to strengthen the requirements for refunds in situations where there's a major disruption and an airline is incapable of completing a journey. And that enhancement in the passenger rights is actually coming into force on September 8th.
Thank you for that. Next, we hear a lot about mandates, whether it's vaccination mandates or whether it's masking mandates or anything else from the Conservative side that never ever supported the introduction of any mandates whatsoever, whether it be masking or vaccination or travel restrictions. And I'm wondering, do you believe the mandates were a necessary program to bring in when COVID first struck our area here in Canada and any of the provinces? And do you think because of the mandates, we've managed to save thousands and thousands of lives? There are people still dying from COVID, but of course, as we know, when it first came to our country and exploded in many provinces, many people did die from the disease, and probably people that shouldn't have died or wouldn't have died only for COVID was the main contributor to it. So do you think we should still pay attention to the public health officials who are recommending we do this or we do that, or yes, it's time to drop this or drop that? And in the essence, I guess at the end of the day, of protecting Canadians' lives, whether they're coming from abroad or traveling from province to province or using any entity for travel, whether it be ferries, trains, and planes.
In terms of the overall impact of mandates on the protection of the population, I would have to defer to colleagues on PHAC on that. Before I do that, I would simply say that at Transport Canada, we have been working and with our partners and putting in place extensive restrictions on travel, as well as rules for safe travel when travel returns. Everything from closing the border, shutting down flights, shutting down cruise ships, to restarting all of these industries, but ensuring that it's done with the right measures for
to protect travelers in the course, whether it's distancing, whether it's mask mandates, vaccine mandates. Those have evolved significantly over the last 2.5 years. We've put in place dozens and dozens of orders and adjusted them dozens of times based on public health conditions and the latest public health science and research. It is our assessment that they have made a significant difference, enabling transportation people, Canadians and foreigners, to travel and do so safely despite the threat of COVID. In terms of the broader question about the impact of mandates on sort of protecting the population, I would have to turn to the colleague from Public Health Agency of Canada.
So with respect to the measures that have been put into place as a result of COVID-19, I mean, we've undertaken a multi-prong or multi-layered approach. With respect to a mandate based on vaccination, obviously a vaccination mandate would mitigate the importation of a variant of COVID-19, as well as decrease the potential for infection and severity. But I mean, along
10
with
seconds, please, Ms. Liftfella.
Along with the vaccine mandate, I mean, Canada has taken that multi-layered approach and implemented a number of other mechanisms to reduce the risk to Canadians' health and increase their health security. And that included, testing as well as quarantine, isolation, and masking. So when you take all those measures together, as Dr. Tam has said on previous occasions, it has gone far in protecting the health of our population.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. McDonald. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur.
Next up, we have Mr. Rossero Duval. You have 2.5 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be for Ms. Liftfella. Because she wasn't finished when I answering my previous question about the quarantine follow-up. She was saying that notification can be sent through ArriveCan or phone calls might be made, but are there physical checks as well to understand that if people are following quarantine conditions?
Yes, we do on-site verification as well, based on the risk that the individual or the risk that the individual may pose with respect to non-compliance. In very, very limited circumstances, after we have an on-site verification, and that's usually done by a security company, we will refer some of those more egregious cases to police of jurisdiction.
Would it be possible to have an idea as to the numbers? How many in-person physical checks have been done over the summer, for instance?
Par rapport au nombre de gens en quarantaine.
Compared to the number of people in quarantine, what would be the percentage of people who have went through physical checks?
I will have to get that number for you. I don't have it readily accessible.
OK, merci.
Okay, thank you. If you could provide the information later on, we would really appreciate. I might have a question for Mr. Keenan, I believe. We keep talking about ArriveCan. Does it work? Does it not work? Does it have bugs and fixes? Maybe it's efficient, maybe it's not when it comes to reducing wait times. We're still looking for evidence and data. I would like to know what the government intends when it comes to keeping ArriveCan in the long term. What's the direction? Is there a clear direction? Will ArriveCan be still in place however many months from now? Will it be stopped at some point?
Président, c'est difficile.
Mr. Chair, it would be hard to come up with a provision as to what the government may decide in that sense. Thank you very much. Up next.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Mr. Keenan regarding the air passenger protection regulations. Now, you mentioned the new amendments to the regulations that are coming into effect on September 8th. Last week, on August 10th, Transport Canada issued a statement stating that amendments to the air passenger protection regulations will come into force to ensure passengers are compensated for flight delays, cancellations, and other incidents that may be out of an air carrier's control. Now, we looked into those amendments, and the amendments don't do that at all. The amendments essentially refund passengers their airfare if they're not able to complete their trip within a certain amount of time. Can you speak to why Transport Canada put out such a misleading press release and is not clear about what these amendments actually achieve?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. The member points out an important change in the air, important improvement in the air passenger protection regulations that actually has as its antecedent the complete shutdown of air travel back in March of 2020. And what happened there is that the passenger rights system had a set of obligations for carriers to, in terms of the treatment of passengers, whether or not a delay is within their control or not. But it didn't actually, the regulations didn't envisage the kind of catastrophic shutdown we saw in March of 2020. And so it didn't speak to what you do if the air carrier can't actually complete the journey in a reasonable time. And there was and that generated the issue of vouchers versus refunds. So in order to, this change ensures that if the passenger wants, they can get compensation in the form of a full cash reimbursement of the ticket if it's a situation where it's impossible for the airline to complete the journey within a reasonable time. Now, short of this amendment, the airlines still have obligations, even if a situation is under the current rules that exist today before September 8th, for rebooking passengers and a duty of accommodation and care, even if the cause of the delay is outside of their control. But this bolsters the rights of passengers when they and gives them the ability to declare no, they just want a refund and they just want their money back.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and thank you,
Chair.
Mr. Keenan. Next, we have Mr. Baldinelli. Mr. Baldinelli, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are going to be to Mr. Vanette, and thank you for being here. It's good to see you again. Mr. Vanette, one of the main issues plaguing our airports not only is ArriveCAN, but we're also hearing about a severe shortage in staffing with regards to CBSA officers, not only at our airports, but our land border points of entry. So, Mr. Vanette, what does CBSA need to do to achieve its full staffing complement in Canada? How many officers are we short?
So the CBSA plans every year for its seasonal fluctuations in traffic in the various modes, land and airports, and through the cruise ship season, and aligns its resources and moves them accordingly. In support of the air transportation sector, we hire student border services officers every year, and they come on strength after their school year ends in April, and they help us, and we retain some of them through the balance of the year so that they're ready to be on site the following year. So they supplement our workforce. In terms of the overall workforce, unlike other sectors, we have had individuals who, as a result of COVID and other measures, have been unable to attend to the workplace, and we've respected that and we've worked with them, and they've continued to contribute to our border services by supporting the front line through other venues and other programs to ensure that we could sustain the capacity. So we continue to advance the staffing, and I'm pleased to report that we've actually doubled our recruitment target for the next 2 years in order to offset the loss of some officers as a result of the COVID restrictions that may have been affecting them and their ability to return to the workplace.
Well, thank you for that. I was just checking the CBSA employment page earlier before coming over, and it said that there was a COVID notice, and it said due to the impacts of COVID-19, we are experiencing unforeseen delays with some aspects of the selection process. In speaking with several stakeholder groups, they had heard that the CBSA training session was closed during COVID, and maybe that's possibly why the shortages and the backlog of officers needed. I'm wondering if you can confirm that. Was that training center in fact closed for a period of time? Did that add to the backlog? And why are we still experiencing unforeseen delays with some aspects of the selection process?
And so the CBSA did shutter its national college for recruitment in Rigaud, Quebec for, I believe it was 2 cycles. I would have to confirm that. And then when it was safe to do so, we reopened and we actually had individuals report to the college. They would quarantine for the 14 days before we began classes. Visitors were kept from entering the location to ensure that we could keep the college as sterile as possible. So we are now back in full operation. And as I stated, we will be doubling our recruitment in order to play.
Thank you. Now, in terms of that cohort, you had mentioned 2 cohorts. How many officers would that have been in total?
In a given year, we target about 275 to 300 new recruits, and therefore it could have been upwards of 600. And we are now back in full cycle, and we will complement our resourcing by doubling those cohorts for the next 2 years.
Now, was CBSA unable to operate? I mean, colleges, universities, even the Ontario Police College were operating in a virtual manner. Why was the training center not able to do the same?
The type of work that we undertake requires that our officers learn hands-on how to operate both the systems. They have to have access to those systems, how to inspect vehicles. They do use of force training throughout the entire curriculum. And so our training for officers is 20 weeks long. The first 4 are at residence online, and then the following 16 need to be in person, very similar to police training and recruitment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Venonette, when we last met in June, it was at the International Trade Committee. I had asked you if you had the opportunity to visit Niagara Falls, again, which is the #1 leisure tourism destination in Canada. So with only 4 weeks left, I'm truly hoping you were able to do so. And is that the case?
I vacationed. My summer vacation was spent at Niagara-on-the-Lake and in Niagara Falls this summer. I have not visited my operations there at this time. I've been heavily focused on the airport operations, and it's been well in hand with our regional director general for the area, with whom I'm in touch on a daily basis, to ensure that we are being responsive to the demands in terms of individuals who are traveling through our land borders, which is now recovered to just above 60% of historical volumes.
Burnett, consider this your invitation again to come down. I'd love to have you down. Again, we've got 4 bridges in my riding alone, and 2 of those are in the top 4 commercial land crossings in all of Canada. So they're vitally important to us. So to ensure the efficient and effective flow of traffic, we would like to have you down. And in fact, speaking to those 2 bridge commissions, because in fact, we're finding bridge traffic down 50% pre-pandemic, but we're finding wait times that could be over 2 hours long in comparison to pre-pandemic times. So we need to find a better solution to those impacting the efficient flow of tourism and trade crossing those border points.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baldinelli. I'm reluctant to point out that I did not receive an invitation to your riding as well. It's very sad, but we'll move on to Ms. Koutrakis. Ms. Koutrakis, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question is to Mr. Keenan. We heard a lot of claims, especially from my colleagues on the Conservative Party, claiming that only the federal government supports keeping ArriveCAN. And I'm just curious to know if you are aware of a letter that was sent to the chair of the Standing Committee on International Trade earlier on this year. And I will quote Louise McKee, who is the Director of Public Affairs and Stakeholder Relations at the Greater Toronto Airports Authority. And I quote, "Starting on June 28th, travelers arriving from international destinations now have the option at Toronto Pearson and Vancouver International Airport of completing their customs declaration in ArriveCAN 72 hours before travel, reducing the time they need to spend at a kiosk in the customs hall by up to 50%. We have already seen significant improvements and benefits as a result of this digital integration." So besides the GTAA having this opinion, have you heard from any other airport authorities that share the same opinion on ArriveCAN?
Mr. Chair, I could offer a general answer to the members' questions, and then I'd turn over to a colleague from CBSA. On this issue, I would say that, as I had indicated in an answer to an earlier question, a lot of hard slogging was done with all partners to get the throughput up through the customs hall and move a lot of people through a small space as traffic came back. At the heart of the strategies there, and there was a lot of really good work our CBSA colleagues did, our GTAA colleagues in terms of passenger facilitation, passenger flow, wayfinding. They could talk about that in some detail, but at the heart of that strategy was using electronic tools and digital systems to get people through faster. That included adding a number of kiosks to the customs hall at Pearson. It added a number of e-gates, and the new functionality that CBSA brought on were the e-declaration and ArriveCAN is integrated into ArriveCAN. I would say that in our discussions with industry and the Air Operations Recovery Group, the expansion and the use and improving the functionality of the digital tools to make for a faster and easier travel process for passengers and to facilitate the international arrivals process is actually a center point of our discussions. And all the industry partners support finding the best combination of tools that respect privacy of passengers, but use digital technology to facilitate that passenger flow. And we're continuing to discussions with them almost daily in terms of how to keep making progress in that area. I don't know, Denny, if you want to add to that, because you guys are on the sharp end of delivering a lot of this.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy. We've been on the path to modernization, digital services for many years, and that kind of bore the birth of the kiosks that we've seen in the airports. We're already working towards transition to e-gates with our industry or air industry partners, and we'd always had a plan to modernize through a digital offering, through various platforms. And so ArriveCAN was required for the capture of the public health measures, but the opportunity to provide your advanced declaration was always something that we already had in the books in terms of the type of work that we're going to deliver. So we had an opportunity as we worked with the airlines and the airport authorities to pursue that now to further expedite the passage through the airports. I can offer that you save about 30% of your passage time using a primary inspection kiosk. You save about 50% of your passage time using an e-gate if you've provided your advanced declaration. And it's already, we are reaping the rewards of its use, already achieving about 35% of the passenger traffic in the 3 airports where it's currently offered. So digital services is one of those elements that the CBSA was pursuing and will continue to pursue, and across all modes, looking to bring that to our land border where we have significant masses, as well as those who enter Canada through pleasure, marine, and aircraft. Thank you. Hope.
Would you say, and I don't know who would be the appropriate person to say, is masking in any way creating any type of delay at our airports?
20-second response, please.
I would say that we continue to, Transport Canada, as evolving regs, continues to require masking while on a plain and secure area of the airports as a protection measure. And that based on evidence, and that I don't have a sense that it materially affects the flow through the flow rates and through the airport. It's not an issue where we feel where there's a problem we had to solve with our industry partners where something was being slowed down because of the fact that people are wearing masks. But I don't know, Denny, or if any of my colleagues may have a comment on that.
I think that's all the time we have, unfortunately, Mr. Keenan. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Katrakis. I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for appearing before committee today. Thank you very much for your time. It was greatly appreciated. And before I conclude the meeting today, colleagues, I just wanted to ask a very quick question. For those of you who are aware or not, we received an invitation from a parliamentary delegation from New Zealand that will be arriving in Ottawa towards the end of September, and they've requested a meeting to discuss areas of importance for them, which will be transport and infrastructure. And if there are no objections from members on this committee, I will instruct the clerk to move forward with the booking of an informal meeting that would not in any way take up the time of the committee's regular business.
We're certainly in agreement with that.
Okay. Seeing no objection, It is approved, and I will so instruct the clerk. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your summer. The meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.